All right, we can all breathe a giant sigh of relief over the crisis at the border. Everything's better, you guys. Vice President Kamala Harris claims she's finally taking things seriously when she's not blaming the surge of migrants on climate change. Watch.
This is a priority for our nation and a role that I take very seriously. We are focused on addressing both the acute factors and the root causes of migration. There are the long-standing issues, the root causes. And I'm thinking of corruption, violence, and poverty, the lack of economic opportunity, the lack of climate adaptation and climate resilience, the lack of good governance.
It's amazing because it's easy to grow drugs, even when there is a climate lack of resilience, Juan. So she's talking about corruption, violence, and poverty as root causes, Juan. These are not root causes. These are actually effects. You can sit around for years and stroke your chin and claim you're getting to the heart of the issues by talking about root causes, but she's not really talking about any root causes here.
Well, I'm trying to understand, make sure I get what you're saying, because it seems to me like she's 100% right, just on the face of it. When people, feel like, they're not safe because of violence in their country, when they feel there's no future for their families, why else would they decide they're going to walk 100 miles with an uncertain future and drag their children along with a backpack? Those are desperate people. And of course, when you have the environment degraded and people can't farm, can't rely on a supply of food, they're going to be desperate, Kennedy.
Lots of farming. And the narco-terrorist governments are making sure that there's plenty of farming because they're growing plenty of drugs. And the governments are enriching themselves. Go ahead.
Oh, what I was going to say is I think that what we see going on right now in places like Venezuela, the level of violence and disruption, that's why I say, to me, this is pretty obvious. You have desperate people, and she is speaking to a root cause and trying to allow and speak the idea that if we can make those places better and safer, it helps not only those people to stay at home, it helps us as Americans because oftentimes those are our neighbors.
They are our neighbors, and they are in need, and they're in very desperate situations. I will absolutely agree with you on that. The root cause is the drug war. So, Greg, Vice President Harris is visiting Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, a lovely city, to talk about infrastructure when it's the immigration system that is crumbling. Why is she so unserious about this issue?
I think we're kind of figuring out that she might not be a serious person at all. I think that they were counting on a learning curve where she would be moving more quickly to take over the job, and then in the next year, I don't think they're going to be able to do it. The issue here is why they talk about climate change and these root causes is because you can't fix it. Not in your lifetime. They don't expect her to do anything but repeat these platitudinous catchphrases that we've heard for years from the Dems. The Dems have two clubs in their golf bag to beat you with: race and climate. They don't have to rely on data. So instead, what they do is they go, well, if you want to be harder on immigration, tougher on immigration, you're a cold-hearted bigot who hates the earth. That's what you do, because then you don't have to actually talk about facts. Remember the game 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, where you could link every actor to Kevin Bacon? Great game. Now we have 6 Degrees. There are two games: 6 Degrees of the Climate Apocalypse or 6 Degrees of Hitler. You're either going to get one or the other from a Democrat. They're either going to try to link something to global warming or try to link something to white supremacy because they are scared to death of actual data.
So when you're talking about actual crises, and I would say, Dana, that what's happening on the southern border, what's happening in these countries, both of them, the root causes and the immediate surge, both crises. So you put the vice president in charge of that, like we saw with the pandemic crisis. There was an urgency there. There was a need to get vaccines made and have them quickly pass through the FDA so you could save lives. That's the kind of urgency that we need to see on the border. When are we going to see that? What will it take?
Well, I would imagine, and just to be very cynical, when their poll numbers crater to the point that they realize that it's going to hurt them in the election. I mean, that's probably when you might see something. The interesting thing about the climate thing is it is a global issue, right? They call it global climate change. But what is the difference between the people who are fleeing the places where they are living and those places that are not having anybody try to flee? It is rule of law and governance. That's the big difference. And obviously there are some countries that are going to be able to adapt slowly. But to Greg's point, it's absolutely right. And the administration admits this. No matter what we try to do, we are not going to be able to solve a global problem when China is building a coal-fired power plant a week.
Yeah.
That's just like not happening, so it doesn't matter. But the other thing here that I would just want to point out very quickly is there's another huge crisis in El Salvador, and the administration kind of finds themselves a little bit twixt in between, because what should they do? In El Salvador, the strongman there has decided he's going to replace judges on its own equivalent of the Supreme Court and put in friends there, and that way that he'll get decisions that are more in his favor. And now the administration has said, an independent judiciary is very important. Really? Well, that's great to know, because so hopefully that means that your idea of court packing on the left is going to be chucked out the window.
Yes, absolutely. That is a different form of court packing with the same results. So, Jesse, I'm just trying to tap into your mind. Before the 2020 midterms, do you see this administration returning to a robust wall along the southern border and some of the migrant protection protocols reintroduced?
Maybe about 25% just for window dressing. But Kennedy, I think we're missing the point. It's not just climate change anymore. It's a new phrase, climate adaptation and climate resilience. We are getting into the intersectionality phraseology now. Juan, I mean, if it's really about the climate, is she going to argue that the sea levels are rising so high that coastal villages are fleeing to higher ground? Because that's not happening, and that would be a lie. Or is she saying that it's now 10 degrees hotter in Guatemala and people are fleeing north to colder climates? Also not happening, but if it is, just explain it like that. Greg nailed it. Climate change and racism is just a lazy deflection from having to actually argue on the substance. This whole thing was triggered by Biden's policies and his rhetoric by promising amnesty and asylum and entitlements. But we love cocaine in this country.
Oh, tell me about it.
Cocaine doesn't come in through Miami anymore. It comes in through Panama, and they have the Panamanian, the corridor that's the biggest drug highway, runs right up through Panama, all through Mexico. And the drug cartels just wreak havoc. And a lot of violence there. It destabilizes a very tender region. And it's not just cocaine they're involved in. They're involved in avocados, tourism. People say on the left, oh, I like my coffee fair trade. I don't want these big corporations involved in my coffee. Okay. Well, who do you think controls the peasants that are making your fair trade coffee? It's the cartels.
Yeah, narco-terrorists.
Fair trade coffee is cartel coffee. That's exactly what it is. So if you really want to do something, it's not climate resilience, it's cartel resilience.
That's absolutely right, Jesse. That's a great point. We should have fair trade cocaine, and we should have it grown and manufactured
and sold at
legally
Starbucks
in these United States. Well said. Starbucks it is. Woo.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.